June 12, 1945, 08:15 hours. Lancashire, England. The rain had turned the courtyard to mud. Obergefreiter Helga Zimmermann stood at attention, her hands clasped behind her back, water dripping from the brim of her cap. She had been standing there for 20 minutes. Behind her, the other women waited in silence. In front of her, a British sergeant approached, boots squelching, clipboard tucked under his arm. He stopped 2 feet away and looked at her. She braced. She had broken a rule. She knew what came next. He cleared his throat. "Miss Zimmermann," he said, his voice flat, deliberate. "You left your work detail without permission yesterday." She nodded. Yes, she had. He paused. Then, why? She had expected shouting. She had expected punishment. She had not expected a question. The moment felt impossible. Not because it was kind. Kindness, she had learned, could be tactical, but because it was curious. It suggested that her reason mattered, that she was not simply a body to be commanded, but a person with agency, however constrained. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "There was a child," she said in halting English. "Crying. By the fence." The sergeant tilted his head. "A child?" "Yes. Small. Maybe 4 years. Lost." He wrote something on his clipboard. Then he looked up. "And I helped her find her mother." The sergeant studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Next time, ask permission first." He turned to leave, then paused. "But thank you," he said, "for helping." She stood there, rain soaking through her uniform, stunned, not punished, thanked. If this moment already changed how you see the war, subscribe. The next will surprise you even more. Helga had been a radio operator in the Luftwaffe Nachrichtenhelferin, the Women's Auxiliary Signals Corps. She had joined in 1943, not out of ideology but necessity. Her mother was a widow, her brother had been killed at Kursk. The Reich offered wages, housing, and purpose. She took all three. For 2 years she sat in windowless rooms and transcribed Morse code, routing messages between airfields and command posts. She did not think about what the messages meant. She just wrote them down. By April 1945, the airfields were craters. The command posts were rubble. Helga's unit was ordered to retreat west toward the British lines in the hope that surrender to the Anglo-Americans would be preferable to capture by the Soviets. They marched for 6 days, sleeping in ditches, eating whatever they could scavenge. On the 7th day, they crossed a river and found British tanks waiting on the other side. A lieutenant with a kind face and a Scottish accent took their names, checked their papers, and loaded them into trucks. "You're prisoners now," he said, "but you'll be treated fairly." Helga didn't believe him. She'd been told too many lies to trust a promise. The journey to England took 3 days. First, a train to the coast, packed, cold, the windows blacked out. Then, a ship across the channel, a converted cargo vessel that smelled of oil and vomit. Helga stood on deck as the white cliffs appeared through the fog, and she thought, "This is the end. This is where I disappear." But she did not disappear. She was processed, documented, assigned a number and a barracks. She was fed, bread, porridge, tea. Not much, but more than she had eaten in weeks. She was given a cot, a blanket, and a bar of soap. She was told the rules: roll call at 0700, work detail at 800, lights out at 2100. No talking after dark, no leaving the compound without permission. The camp was a converted manor house on the edge of Lancashire, surrounded by fields and low stone walls. There were no barbed wire fences, no guard towers, just a gate, a sentry, and a sign that read, "Number 18, Women's POW Detachment, British Army, Northern Command." It looked more like a boarding school than a prison. Helga did not trust it. She had learned over 6 years of war that appearances were always deceptive. The first act of decency came on the 2nd day. Helga was assigned to the kitchen, peeling potatoes, scrubbing pots, sweeping floors. The work was mindless, but it kept her hands busy. At noon, the cook, a stout woman named Mrs. Dawson, civilian local, set a bowl of stew in front of her and said, "Eat." Helga hesitated. Prisoners did not eat with the staff. Mrs. Dawson frowned. "Go on then. It'll get cold." Helga ate. The stew was thick with carrots and lamb, rich enough to make her stomach ache. Mrs. Dawson watched her, arms crossed. When Helga finished, the cook took the bowl and said, "You're too thin. We'll fix that." Helga did not know what to say. She settled for, "Thank you." Mrs. Dawson shrugged. "It's just stew." But it was not just stew. It was the first time in months that someone had looked at her and seen a person instead of a category. "She gave me stew," Helga wrote later in a letter she never sent. "I had forgotten what kindness tasted like." The system behind this decency was policy, not sentiment. In 1940, the British War Office had issued a directive that would shape every POW camp for the duration of the conflict. Prisoners are soldiers, not slaves. They will be treated with dignity, consistent with security. The language was bureaucratic, but the principle was clear. Humane treatment was not optional. It was doctrine. The logic was threefold. Security: well-treated prisoners did not riot, did not sabotage, did not require violence to contain. Diplomacy: the enemy held British soldiers, and reciprocity was survival. Morality: because if you abandoned decency in war, you lost the thing you were fighting to preserve. It was not perfect. There were camps where guards were cruel, where conditions were poor, where the rules were bent or broken, but the system as a whole held. By the summer of 1945, Britain held over 400,000 German POWs. Most were fed, most were housed, most survived. In a war where survival was never guaranteed, that mattered. The days found a rhythm. Mornings began with roll call, names read from a ledger, faces checked against a list. Then breakfast, porridge, toast, margarine, tea. The women ate in silence, still adjusting to the fact that the food was consistent, that the portions were predictable, that no one would take it away. After breakfast, work details. Helga remained in the kitchen. Others were assigned to the laundry, the gardens, the repair shop. The work was not punitive, it was purposeful. The British believed in structure, not as control but as dignity. Idle hands bred despair, work bred routine, and routine, however mundane, was a form of stability. Evenings were quieter. After supper, the women gathered in the common room, a drafty space with mismatched chairs and a piano that nobody played. Some wrote letters, some mended clothes, some just sat and stared at the walls, processing the fact that they were still alive. Helga wrote letters to her mother, though she did not know if they would arrive. She wrote about the food, the weather, the strange kindness of Mrs. Dawson. She did not write about the war. There was nothing left to say. One afternoon, Helga dropped a teacup. It shattered on the stone floor, porcelain scattering in every direction. She froze. In the camps she had heard about, the ones whispered about in the barracks, breaking something meant punishment. A slap. A shout. A day without food. Mrs. Dawson looked up from the stove. She walked over, glanced at the shards, and handed Helga a broom. "Accidents happen," she said. "Clean it up, then get back to work." That was all. No anger, no consequences. Just clean it up. Helga swept up the pieces, hands trembling, and thought, "This place does not make sense." "I broke a cup," she wrote later. "She gave me a broom. I expected violence. I found patience." One of the guards, a corporal named Davies Welsh, soft-spoken, stopped by the kitchen one evening. He pulled a photograph from his pocket and showed it to Helga. A woman, 2 children. "My wife," he said, "and my boys." Helga looked at the photograph. She did not know why he was showing it to her. Davies smiled. "They're in Cardiff. Safe. I get to see them in August." Helga nodded. She thought about her own family, her mother in a city that might not exist anymore, her brother in a grave she would never visit. She thought about saying this. Instead, she said, "They are beautiful." Davies tucked the photograph away. "War's almost over," he said. "We all get to go home soon." Helga did not ask where home was for her. She was not sure she had one anymore. On a Sunday evening, someone started singing. It was one of the younger women, a girl named Erica, 19, a typist from Hamburg. She sang a folk song, something about a meadow and a stream. The others listened. Then, one by one, they joined in. The guards did not stop them. One, a sergeant named Bell, stood in the doorway and listened. When the song ended, he nodded and walked away. The next Sunday, he brought a gramophone and played records, German folk songs, British hymns, American jazz. He did not explain why. He just played the music and left. The women sang along. It was the first time in years that they had sung something that was not a marching song or a propaganda anthem. It was the first time music felt like theirs. If you're seeing this war in a new light, subscribe. The next scene will challenge you even more. The shift was gradual. Helga had been told for years that the British were monstrous, that they bombed cities indiscriminately, that they treated prisoners like animals, that surrender meant death, or worse. She had believed this because everyone believed this, because doubt was treason, because the alternative was unbearable. But the British did not act like monsters. They acted like people who were tired and decent and trying to finish a job. They said please and thank you. They asked questions instead of issuing commands. They gave second chances to women who broke teacups and left work details without permission. The propaganda cracked. Not all at once, but slowly like mortar between bricks. One day Helga realized she was no longer afraid of the guards. She was just wary, and wary was better than terrified. In August, a chaplain arrived. He was an Anglican priest, thin and serious, with a northern accent that reminded Helga of the farmers near her childhood home. He held a service in the common room, hymns, a reading, a brief homily about forgiveness. Helga attended not because she believed, but because it was something to do. Afterward, the chaplain approached her. "How are you managing?" he asked in careful German. She thought about lying. Instead, she said, "I don't know." He nodded. "That's all right. None of us do." He did not offer platitudes. He did not tell her everything would be fine. He just sat with her for a few minutes, in silence, and then moved on to the next woman. It was the most honest conversation she had had in months. In September, Helga was called to the commandant's office. She walked across the courtyard, her heart pounding, certain that something had gone wrong. The commandant, a major with grey hair and tired eyes, gestured to a chair. "Sit." She sat. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. "This arrived yesterday. It's from the Red Cross. Your mother is alive. She's in a displaced persons camp near Dresden." Helga stared at the paper. She could not read it. It was in English, but she understood the words mother and alive. She looked up at the major. "She is alive," he said. "You can write to her. We'll help you send it." Helga took the paper with shaking hands. She had not cried in over a year. She cried then. The major handed her a handkerchief. "Take your time," he said. Then he left the room, quietly, and gave her space to fall apart. The letter took her 3 days to write. She did not know what to say. How do you explain a war in a letter? How do you tell your mother that you survived but you do not know why? She settled for the simplest truth. I am alive. I am safe. I will come home. Mrs. Dawson helped her mail it. She stood beside Helga at the post office in the village, technically off limits, but the guards had looked the other way, and watched her drop the envelope into the box. "She'll get it," Mrs. Dawson said, "and she'll write back." Helga nodded. She believed her. She had learned slowly to believe in small kindnesses. Christmas came. The camp was decorated. Pine boughs, candles, a tree in the common room. The women were invited to a service, followed by a meal. Roast chicken, potatoes, gravy, pudding. It was more food than Helga had seen in one place in years. After the meal, the chaplain stood and said a prayer, not a triumphant one, just a quiet acknowledgement of survival. "We are here," he said, "and that is enough." The women sat in silence. Some cried, some smiled, some just stared at their plates, processing the fact that they were alive, that they were fed, that they were not alone. Helga thought about her mother, about her brother, about the girl she had been when the war started, and the woman she had become. She thought, I do not know who I am anymore, but I am still here. Repatriation began in January 1946. The women were called in groups, given train tickets, and sent back to Germany, or what was left of it. Helga was in the third group. She packed her small bundle of belongings, a comb, a bar of soap, the handkerchief the major had given her. Mrs. Dawson gave her a tin of biscuits. "For the journey," she said. Helga hugged her. It was the first time she had hugged anyone since the war began. Mrs. Dawson patted her back and said, "You'll be all right, love. You're stronger than you think." The train left at dawn. Helga sat by the window and watched the English countryside slide past. Green fields, stone walls, villages untouched by war. She thought, this place survived. Maybe I can too. She found her mother in March in a displaced persons camp near Leipzig. They held each other and cried and did not speak for a long time. There was too much to say and no words large enough to hold it. Helga stayed in Germany. She worked as a translator for the British occupation forces, then as a clerk in a school. She married in 1950, a teacher, quiet, kind, and had 2 daughters. She never spoke about the war. But every Christmas she baked biscuits and thought about a British cook who had given her stew and called her Love. In 1983 she returned to England. She took a train to Lancashire and walked to the old manor house. It was a nursing home now, the gate gone, the stone walls crumbling. She stood in the courtyard where she had once waited in the rain expecting punishment, and she thought, "This is where I learned that mercy was possible." She did not go inside. She just stood there for a while, remembering. Then she left. The sergeant had asked her a question, not a command, not an accusation, just why? And in that question she had found something she thought the war had taken from her, the possibility that her reasons mattered, that she was not just a number, a uniform, a problem to be solved, that she was a person who could make choices, small ones, constrained ones, but choices nonetheless. If this story reminded you that history is written in gestures as much as battles, subscribe. You'll find more truths here than in any textbook. In 2003, Helga died peacefully in her sleep. Her daughters found a box of letters in her closet, letters she had written but never sent. One was addressed to Mrs. Dawson. It said, in careful English, "You gave me stew. You gave me kindness. You gave me a reason to believe that the world was not entirely broken. Thank you." The daughters tried to find Mrs. Dawson. They could not, but they kept the letter anyway because some gratitude does not need a recipient. It just needs to be spoken. The rain had turned the courtyard to mud. The woman stood at attention, braced for punishment. The guard approached and asked a question, not a shout, not a command, just a question. And in that space between expectation and reality, between fear and mercy, the war finally ended. Not with a treaty, not with a parade, but with a voice that said, "Your reasons matter. You are human. You are seen." The war had taught them fear, the peace taught them mercy. And mercy, she learned, was not the absence of punishment. It was the presence of a question asked gently in the rain.